أجمعين وبعد. So today is the last session of the Fiqh Hanbali course for this semester. We will get through a little bit, a couple of these slides, and then once we stop, I'll kind of mark that point as the end of where we stopped this semester. The exam will be basically on what we covered, and then next semester we'll continue from where we left off until the end of Ibadat, inshaAllah ta'ala. You're welcome to sit. Yeah, you can just listen into it, that's okay. So inshallah, the plan will be that the ibadat piece of this text will be taught in two parts. I'm not going to teach all of Zad al-Mustaqni', I'm just going to teach the ibadat piece that Musa Ferber's translation covered over two parts, inshallah ta'ala. Today, this semester, and then we'll come back probably second week of September or so for the second part. And then we'll conclude it by the end of the year, inshallah ta'ala. So, because we only have half an hour, so we're going to start, inshallah ta'ala, to see how far we can get. So, يقول المصنف رحمه الله الأولى بالإمامة الأقرأ العالم فقه صلاته ثم الأفقه ثم الأسن ثم الأشرف ثم الأقدم هجرة ثم الأتقى ثم من فرغ أو من فرع. Sorry. So the most qualified to lead the prayer is an expert reciter who knows the fiqh of his prayer, and then after him, the one who is most knowledgeable in fiqh. There are two who are competent in fiqh and recitation. The one who's superior in fiqh or in recitation is given in precedence. If they are both competent reciters, the one with better recitation is given precedence over the one who has memorized more. An individual who is competent with the Quran but does not know the rulings associated with the prayer is given precedence over someone who knows fiqh but does not know proper recitation. If two individuals know the rulings associated with prayer and one of them knows the rulings better than the other one, he is given precedence. This is because his knowledge has an influence in achieving the complete perfection of the prayer. Then if they're equal in recitation and in fiqh, the eldest is chosen. If equal in age, then the most noble in terms of their background, if they're from Quraysh or if they have a lineage that is a nobility. If they both have that, then the eldest with respect to their hijrah, if that's still a thing. If they are all equal in all respects, then the most God-fearing is chosen. And if they are equal in that, then I think it's ثم من قرأ. Then it's just going to be based on drawing. It'll be flipping a coin basically. So what he's talking about here is just who is it that's going to lead yani salah. If you can just make it smaller because it's a little bit too big. Yeah, jazakallah khair. So first of all, whoever is aqra, who is perfected recitation and knows the fiqh of prayer. If they both have that, then whoever has more fiqh in general. If one person has more fiqh, but the other one has more recitation, then it's recitation that gets dibs. The more proficient in recitation of the Quran, the more proficient in memorization of the Quran comes ahead of fiqh, as long as the person knows the basics of fiqh of their prayer. If they don't, if the person is, they know how to recite, but they don't know fiqh of prayer, then in that case, the faqih, the person who does, would be given precedence. Then if they're equal in recitation and fiqh, then whoever's older, and then if they're equal in that, whoever has more nobility in their lineage, and then after that, whoever's aqdam hijrah, then anyone who is known to have more taqwa, and then it's just, if everyone's the same, then it's just, if no one's offering, in imamah, you should be offering someone else, so you shouldn't be fighting for it, but if they are, then if they achieve that they're all equal in all of these ways, then it's going to be by drawing lots. Allahu a'lam. وساكن البيت وإمام المسجد أحق إلا من ذي سلطان. So a resident of the house and the imam of the masjid is the one who leads the prayer unless someone of authority is there. All right. So if a visiting imam is coming in, it's always the imam of the masjid who should lead the prayer. Like, if an imam visits you at home, you're the one who should be leading the prayer at your home. Now you can offer it; it's not wrong. But I'm just saying that the precedence goes to the person who owns the house and the ongoing imam, or what is the word here? The mosque's imam, the imam al-ratib. I talked about imam al-ratib before, and that he's the one who would get precedence. And then only if the person of authority is there. So if the khalifa or the wali or the amir is visiting you in your home or visiting the masjid, then they do get they lead because they're a person of authority. Aside from that, it's going to be the person who owns the house and the imam of the masjid. وحر وحاضر ومقيم وبصير ومختون ومن له ثياب أولى من ضدهم. So someone who is free, someone who is from the city, someone who is a resident, someone who who has eyesight, who's not blind, makhtun, someone who is circumcised, someone who is wearing proper clothes for it, are given precedence over those who don't have the opposites. Right? So if a hurr and a abd, then the hurr should lead. If someone who is hadir versus someone from the badiyah, the hadir should lead. The muqim versus someone who's traveling, the muqim should lead, etc., etc. So however, I mean, there are precedences in terms of these things. But if you come in and someone, then you can follow. The opposite can follow. Like a hurr can, as you'll explain in a moment, can pray behind the abd. But this is saying if two people, I mean, they don't really have any of the what we just talked about a second ago in terms of who's aqra and who's afqah, and we don't know, then just these are other ways to establish who should lead the prayer. ولا تصح خلف فاسق ككافر ولا خلف امرأة ولا خنثى للرجال ولا صبي لبالغ ولا أخرس ولا عاجز عن ركوع أو سجود أو قعود أو قيام إلا إمام الحي المرجو زوال علته ويصلون وراءه جلوسا ندبا فإن ابتدأ بهم قائما ثم اعتل فجلس أتموا خلفه قياما وجوبا. So this is a nice paragraph for people to know. The prayer of someone who is moral is not valid behind someone who is immoral, whether the corruption is from their perspective of just actions and beliefs, or if they are kafir altogether. The prayer of a male is not valid behind a lady. So the concept of صلوا خلف كل بر وفاجر. For the Hanbalis, hadith, they take issue with praying behind a fajr. المعروف فجوره. Meaning if someone is known to be fajr, someone who is openly fasiq, openly fajr, openly kafir, then you don't pray behind that person. If someone is not openly known to be that, you just happen to have some inside information about them, it doesn't apply. You don't get to, you just say, I'm not praying behind fulan because I've seen him do this or that. No, you pray. But it's talking about someone who is public with their fujur, then a mu'min does not pray behind them. And a man doesn't follow a woman in prayer except inside a household, between a husband and a wife. There are some exceptions there, but in general, a man doesn't follow a woman in prayer. And the obligatory prayer of an adult is not valid behind a minor. And so وَلَا صَبِيٍّ لِبَالِغٍ. So this is where we're talking about someone who is too young to lead. Like they're too young to lead. I mean, they don't have the ability to perform their proper tahara, and they don't have the skill set that allows them to do that. So that's where that shouldn't happen. But if the person, if they're just young, because they're just young, they're 15 or 16, and mumayyiz, mean they know what is correct and they know what is not correct, they have the ability of tamyiz, then you follow them in prayer. But if they're children shouldn't be leading adults, wallahu alam fi as-salah. And this is, again, and there's difference of opinion on this, but this is the Hanbali take on this topic. The prayer is not valid behind someone who is mute or even someone else like him. This is because something obligatory has been nullified without bringing something in its place. So a person who is akhras, who cannot speak, should not be leading people who can. Because this person who cannot speak will not be able to actually recite the Fatiha, and for the Hanbalis that is an important issue, so it does not apply. Now, if they're all mute, then it doesn't matter, but if there's one of them who speaks and is capable of reciting Fatiha appropriately, then that person would lead for sure. So, and the prayer is not valid behind someone who's incapable of bowing, prostrating, or sitting except by someone like him. So again, if the person cannot perform ruku' properly, can't perform julus properly, can't perform sujood properly, then they shouldn't be leading. Someone else should be leading, except, he gives an exception here. Unless he is the imam of the neighborhood and recovery from his injury is expected. So if the imam of the masjid is not able to perform a certain movement, but it's a surgery, for example, and within a couple of weeks the person is going to be better, or but even if it's a year, they think then there's the hope of this person recovering, then you can continue to follow the imam. Now he does explain a few things here that's important. So if he sits, if he prays sitting down, then if the imam can't stand up altogether, so he's going to pray sitting down, then the sunnah is for everyone behind him to pray sitting down as well, right? But they're allowed to stand up for the Hanbalis. The Shafi'is, they're not. They have to sit down. Absolutely, they have to sit down. But for the Hanbalis, they're allowed to stand up, but it's nadib, it's mandub, it's recommended for them to sit down. If he starts prayer standing up, and then but he can't continue the whole prayer standing up, and then he sits down. Everyone has to continue to stand up. They can't sit down. They're not allowed to sit down after that, unless they are sick, obviously, or ill, or they're using chairs on their own, right? So if he stands up, even for a moment, just for takbiratul ihram, then sits down, everyone has to stay standing up. If he sits down, then the mustahab is that they sit down like him, right? What's more mustahab is that if he cannot perform these movements, for him to put someone in his position to do it until he's capable. That's what is recommended in general. وتصح خلف من به سلس البول بمثله. It is valid for someone who is incontinent to pray behind someone like him, but he's not allowed to lead people who don't have it. So سلس البول, which is someone who's incontinent, this is the example of someone who has an ongoing hadath, someone who has an ongoing ritual impurity. Right? This is how the scholars describe it. Ongoing ritual impurity. I mean, there's always hadath happening, always hadath going on. For example, someone who has a catheter in, and this catheter is attached to his leg, or he has a conduit, and that's where the urine is coming out, or that's where the feces are coming out. This someone is someone who has ongoing hadath. So they can't lead people who don't have this. But they can lead people who do have something similar to it for sure, but not those who don't. And someone like that makes wudu and prays. Right? They just make wudu and pray, and they kind of ignore. And their wudu has to happen for every salah. So they can't hold their wudu for 3 or 4 prayers in a row. Every prayer they have to make wudu, like tayammum, because of the ongoing hadath. Now, they made wudu and they had their bag and something came out through the bag. It doesn't matter. They made wudu and they let out gas. They repeat their wudu. All right, so the ongoing hadath that they have, whatever it may be, if it continues to produce impurities, that's fine. They make wudu and they pray. But if they run into an impurity outside of their ongoing one after wudu, then they have to repeat their wudu, and they have to make wudu for every prayer. All right, like the mustahada, like the with istihada does, similar to that situation. ولا تصح خلف محدث ولا متنجس يعلم ذلك فإن جهل هو والمأموم حتى انقضت صحت لمأموم وحده ولا إمامة الأمي وهو من لا يحسن الفاتحة أو يدغم فيها ما لا يدغم أو يبدل حرفا أو يلحن فيها لحنا يحيل المعنى إلا بمثله وإن قدر على إصلاحه لم تصح صلاته. So this is important because again the aspects of imamah here I use this whenever I teach imamah to people who are going to pray tarawih. I just steal what Zad al-Mustaqna has to teach them because it has all the basics that they need, and it's probably the most comprehensive review on this topic amongst the different books of fiqh. It is not valid to knowingly pray behind someone with ritual impurity or impurity. If the imam and the follower are ignorant of this until the prayer ends, only the follower's prayer is valid. So, you're not allowed as a follower, because it's important, to pray behind someone you know doesn't have wudu. But if you didn't know they didn't have wudu, and you found out after, your salah is fine. Their salah isn't. Right? Their salah isn't. If the imam continues knowing till the end, his salah has to be repeated, but yours doesn't. Right? If your salah has to be repeated, the imam's salah has to be repeated, obviously, because he didn't have ritual impurity, but yours doesn't because you didn't know. It's only when you knew. If you knew that imam has najasa on him or didn't have wudu and you prayed, then your salah is invalid there. But if the imam prayed and then remember I didn't have wudu altogether, the people behind him, their prayer is fine. It's his prayer that he has to repeat. If while praying the imam realizes that he usually goes a little bit, he goes through a little bit more detail. But you can omit this. You don't need this. Just what I explained is enough for now, because anything more complicated is for a second level study of fiqh. I'm not going to go into too much detail of it now. It is not valid for the illiterate to lead anyone who is not like him. Illiterate, al-ummi in fiqh, is the person who cannot recite Surah Al-Fatiha appropriately. That's al-ummi. So it's not about whether they can read and write, it's whether they can recite Al-Fatiha appropriately. So if you can't recite Al-Fatiha appropriately, you can't lead someone who can recite Surah Al-Fatiha appropriately. It's very important. The Hanabila go into more detail. If the person yudghim ma la yudgham, meaning they are ruining letters, they're basically fusing letters together, they're changing letters around, they're not saying them appropriately, then this person should not be leading, especially if they're changing the meaning in any way, then they should not be leading. And if the person can fix it and it is not, then their salah is not acceptable. This is a big deal. This is a big deal for older people, people in their 50s and 60s who maybe didn't pray during their 20s and 30s or were never taught. They don't read Fatiha appropriately. We're going to start, inshallah, in this message because we've talked about this for the last couple of years, where we start like a Surah Al-Fatiha course. A course as in a small cycles where the people just come through for a few weeks, they recite every until they get Fatiha correct. Because if you can perfect Surah Al-Fatiha and you're making mistakes that are changing the meaning or you're ruining letters. Imam al-Shafi'i counted 17 shaddas or 13 shaddas in Surah Al-Fatiha. If you miss one of them, your salah is batil. Your salah is acceptable. So either if you're a Shafi'i or a Hanbali, then you have to do Surah Al-Fatiha. If you don't want to, just go become Hanafi, and then the Hanafis, they're not as they're not as adamant when it comes to the requirement of Surah Al-Fatiha. They care for it, but they're not as strict. But it obviously Surah Al-Fatiha is one of the more superior verses of the Quran, so you should learn to recite it appropriately. And if you know the person in front of you can't recite, then it's a problem for you, and they're going to recite incorrectly in ways that are obvious, then it's permissible for you to follow them in prayer. This is where problems come, especially when you have people who want to lead and they don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to read properly, and they want to lead, and I don't know why they want to lead when they don't know how to read. But so it causes problem for the people behind them, because like you're leading, ya akhi, you don't know how to read, you're causing problems for us. So they shouldn't be able to lead. وتكره إمامة اللحان والفأفاء والتمتام ومن لا يفصح ببعض الحروف وأن يؤم أجنبية فأكثر لا رجل معهن أو قوم أكثرهن يكرهه بحق. So it's offensive to lead the prayer when one makes grammatical mistakes. لحن باللغة العربية is not rhythm, at least not in fiqh books. يلحن meaning you speak in a way where you're messing up the grammar. There's a known story when one of the scholars of Arabiya went into one of the Khalifa, and the Khalifa said something and it was wrong, like he made a mistake. So he asked him a question, he made a mistake. So the scholar responded and made a mistake. So the Khalifa asked him, you're a scholar of Arabic and you made this mistake. فقال لحن الأمير فلحنا ولو أعرب الأمير لأعربنا. You made a mistake. I didn't want to be. I have to. If you're saying it wrong, then I should probably say it wrong too, because you're the Amir. And if you said it right, I would have said it right. So the concept of lahan is when you speak grammatically incorrectly. You should not lead a prayer. And stutters. If you stutter, you shouldn't. If you ruin letters, like you can't get certain letters out, they don't come out appropriately. The letter does not. You just don't have the ability to pronounce it. Then you shouldn't lead prayer. It's makruh. It's not haram. It's makruh. Here he's talking about karaha. So if someone leads like that, the prayer is not invalid. It's just makruh for that person to lead the prayer that way. If certain letters don't come out altogether, then they shouldn't. For a man to lead unrelated women, just women, he shouldn't do that. Like if it's family members, it's fine. But if it's just he's coming to pray and there's a bunch of women he's never met before, he doesn't know them, there's no men there at all, then they should pray their own prayer. He should pray his own prayer. It's not appropriate for him to do that. And he should not lead if the majority of the congregation does not like him. No, this is important. This is important. لا تؤم من يكرهونك. If you're going to a place and this place is not a pleasant atmosphere for you, like this environment is most of the people there in the congregation, they don't like you, you should not lead people in prayer if you know that they don't want you to be leading them in prayer. They dislike your leading of prayer. This is important. This happens a lot, by the way. And outside of it happens all the time. Like an imam who was there for years, fought with half the community, came back a few years later to pray. Everyone's there. They don't like him. They don't want him to. He should not be leading prayer. But they do it just to spite each other sometimes. But it's makruh. It's makruh. Shar'an for an imam to lead. It's makruh for you to lead people that they don't want you to lead them. Just step back. Imam is a big responsibility. You carry the whole salah with everyone in it and everything they're doing. It's actually a nightmare. You should not be fighting for it. I try to teach the shabab. You shouldn't be fighting for it. It's a big problem. You shouldn't be doing it. If it's offered to you and you're pushed to do it and you're the one who knows how and no one else is qualified as you are, then you should go ahead. It's a responsibility that you are obligated to carry, but you shouldn't be clawing to get this. If you do, then you don't understand exactly how dangerous what you're doing is and the amount of responsibility that you're carrying on the Day of Judgment on your shoulders. وتصح إمامة ولد الزنا والجندي إذا سلم دينهما ومن يؤدي الصلاة بمن يقضيها وعكسه لا مفترض بمتنفل ولا من يصلي الظهر بمن يصلي العصر أو غيرهما. It is valid for an illegitimate child or a personal servant to lead the prayer providing the religion is sound. So this has to be pointed out because the Arab before this had an issue with that. Like the Arab had an issue with bastards doing anything that had any degree of nobility or any degree of leadership. They had a problem with that. So this has to be there, is that no, this person obviously is here because of a mistake that someone else made, but if they have deen, and then they can lead. And and there are stories of that, of imams and scholars who came from these type of backgrounds. Now, this may not be the place for this. It probably isn't the place for this, but I have to make a comment for you. In your mind, you're probably telling yourself, well, what did this person do wrong? Nothing. This person did nothing wrong. And this bastard did nothing wrong. This person who was born to sifah, where the man and woman were not married when they did nothing wrong. But if you are going to normalize that, if you're going to say, no, this person can do absolutely everything, and we're going to completely ignore this, and what you're doing also on that same front, you're trying to help this one person, but as you're helping this one person, you are normalizing this whole action. You're normalizing sifah, meaning you're encouraging people to do this in a sense. In a sense, you're saying it's fine, go ahead and do it. Why? Well, because there's no stigma anymore. Stigma exists not to oppress this person. Stigma exists to discourage a social behavior, if that makes sense to you. This is very difficult. It's a very difficult topic to discuss, but it's very important. Because you look at this human being, this poor kid did nothing wrong. I agree. The stigma that is connected to this whole issue for this kid is not to oppress him. We're not trying to oppress this child. Actually, the sunnah is if this happens, that the mother and the child move. They move from where they are. They go live somewhere else, where the people don't know anything about them, and there's less reason for that to be questioned. Like the sunnah, the recommendation is that the person doesn't stay in a place where the stigma is going to stick, right? But the stigma that exists with this is there to discourage this action, even though it may carry some toll over the actual child or the person in themselves. It is the ongoing, everlasting, classical, traditional problem of saving the group versus saving the individual. The same problem. What do we do here? Whose maslahah comes first? The group or the individual? I feel for the individual. We all do. The Prophet ﷺ would scorn people who would point out to someone else that you don't know your father or something like that. Or would say something about their background. The Prophet would scorn them because they did nothing wrong. You want to save the individual, but at the same time, you want to save the community. You want to save the whole group. The group, us as a human race, we are governed by social norms and by the stigmas that are put on certain behaviors, which will keep people back from doing them. If we start removing them, which is what we did here, it becomes normal. It's not even a thing. It doesn't even matter anymore. I have a child from a sperm bank. This became acceptable. This thing became acceptable. Like, I remember the first time I heard this, wallahi, I felt like I almost had an aneurysm. And I went, and the first thing I wanted to do was go tell my sheikh, they actually do this? And he laughed. He thought I was joking. Because like for people who grow up with a certain understanding of halal and haram, a certain understanding of the importance of family and the value of matrimony and the importance of nasab and the importance of this is just unheard of. It makes no, but it's normal now. It doesn't matter. You can have a child from whatever source you want to have a child. We end up. It's proven itself not to work. Is what I want to say. It's proven itself that this doesn't work. It doesn't function within communities. It does not function well at all. Children who are born from these backgrounds, even when they live in societies that are not stigmatized, they still struggle. They still struggle, even in societies that don't care, and there's 2 mothers and 3 fathers in each family, and it doesn't matter. They still grow up feeling the stigma because they run into those who have proper functioning families, where there's a father and a mother and his matrimony is working, and they feel that there's something's obviously missing in their lives, and they can't help but have that, and it doesn't work very well. So this is why, I just want to say that's why he talked about that here, so you understand kind of where this is coming from. It is also valid for someone making up a prayer to lead someone who is praying for the current prayer and vice versa. It is not valid for someone praying a voluntary prayer to leave someone who's praying an obligatory prayer, nor for someone praying the afternoon prayer to leave someone who's praying the noon prayer or something else. Although this is valid for an imam praying an obligatory to leave someone who's praying a voluntary prayer. So this is where, did I talk about this later on? I didn't. Maybe I probably didn't. All right. So this is, he doesn't go into a lot of detail here. This is not the opinion of all the Hanbalis, and this is not the opinion that we usually follow here in this masjid, at least, because I take the more easier opinion. So here he points out that if I'm praying a fard as an imam, you can pray a nafila behind me. You can pray like a sunnah. Or you can repeat maghrib if you've prayed it already. Actually, anything but maghrib. You can do it. Maghrib is, yeah, you can, but it's just recommended. You can pray a sunnah behind me. If you just want to pray 3 rak'ah sunnah, that's fine as well. The vice versa, here he's pointing out that it is not permissible for someone who's praying a sunnah to have someone praying a fard to be led by them. But the Shafi'is disagree, and the majority of the late Hanbali scholars disagree as well. So almost every combination is acceptable aside from the combination of a muqim bi musafir yaqsur. So someone who is praying a 4 rak'ah prayer as a resident of the area, leading someone who is traveling with the intention of praying it half. So if you're traveling and your intention is to pray asr half, you don't pray behind the imam of the masjid who's doing the 4. If you're going to pray behind the imam of the masjid of doing the 4, you do the 4. Or you wait for them to finish and do your 2 rak'ah, and then make iqamah, pray 2 rak'ah, dhuhr 2 rak'ah, and then make iqamah, pray asr 2 rak'ah. But if you walk into the masjid and this imam is praying, oh, I'll just pray 2 and do salams, no. Don't do that. That's the only one that the majority of Islamic Muslim scholars amongst the madhab don't agree upon or see to be impermissible. Everything else, there's enough evidence to argue is permissibility. Then again, the Hanbalis are more strict on this topic, and I've talked about this before, because the Hanbalis require the imam to have the intention. Right? So if someone who didn't have the intention of the imam, you're not supposed to follow them. Right? So they're the only madhab that require that. Every other madhab does not. I mean, you don't need a specific intention for leading. You need a specific intention for following. You have to have the intention of following someone who's leading the prayer. You don't have to have an intention of leading prayer. You can just, for the majority of schools. The Hanbali specifically, they require an intention for the leaders, for the imam themselves, which is why they're a little bit more strict on this topic in general. But take that with a grain of salt, because the later Hanbali scholars disagree with this. They're more open to it, as I explained. Ya Latif. All right. So he talks a little bit more about kind of where it is. So يقف المأمومون خلف الإمام. The followers stand behind the imam. ويصح معه عن يمينه أو عن جانبيه لا قدامه ولا عن يساره فقط. ولا قد خلفه أو خلف الصف إلا أن يكون امرأة. It is valid for the followers to stand with the imam on his right or on both sides of him. But it's not valid to stand in front of the imam or only on his left if there is space open on the right and if he prays 1 or more prayer cycles. If a second person joins the prayer, they both stand behind the imam, as we all know this. If the second person joins the prayer on the imam's left, the imam directs them with his hand to move behind him. If the imam has doubts about whether or not the followers understood his directions or is unable to direct them, he steps forward and prays between the followers on their left. It is valid for the follower on the right to step back before the second person and makes the opening Allahu Akbar so that they both pray behind the imam. And because the Shafi'is aren't okay with that, that's why he's pointing this out here. It is the second person reaches, if the second person reaches the imam and his follower while they are seated, he makes the Allahu Akbar and sits on the right of the other follower or on the left of the imam. It is not valid for an individual to pray behind the imam or behind the line unless the individual is a woman. So to make this simple, for the Hanbalis, it's not that complicated, as we all know. When I pray, what you do is you come, you can stand right beside me. You don't have to stand behind me. You can stand right beside me, as long as you're not ahead of me. Right? That's the idea. So if you come and you put your foot right beside my foot, exactly parallel, that's fine. If you do it a little bit behind, that's fine. You're always on the right. If someone else comes in, then they should stand behind and get the other person to come. If they don't, the other person doesn't know what they're doing, so they come and stand beside the second guy. Then the first one should go back and pull the other one with them. If neither of them do, then the imam takes a step forward. If he makes a gesture. So usually imams can make a gesture to push them back. If they didn't understand, then he goes up front. If he's praying, there's one person on the side, and another person comes on the left side, then he gestures for them to go back. In salah, it's fine. If they don't listen, then he goes up front, and then they will close it between them. And you have to pray behind the imam, not in front of them. Now he doesn't talk about the obviously the details here. the details that that require the fatwa that I offered for this masjid. But even for the Hanbalis, if there's a darura, if there is a necessity, then the ma'moom can be ahead of the imam, he just can't be right in front of him. So this mihrab here, there's nothing in front of it. None of the people who are praying up front are right in front of the imam here. They are what's in front of the imam here is the basically is the corridor, the corridor. So no one up front is praying right in front of the imam. They're praying more. I'm praying here. They're praying up there. So they're ahead, but they're not in front. It's in front that the scholars are absolutely refusing of. But in his direction, but is fine as long as they're in the same direction. It's fine when there's a darura, when there's a need. The Malikiyya don't require a need. The Malikis are okay with this without a need. The Hanbalis are okay with it with a need, meaning something like this, where the sound system is here, and this is where we have to pray. We have no choice. I can't open the doors, suspend people back. I have to have them up front, and then they can go ahead and they can pray up front. But they're not allowed. For example, in Fard, if we're praying Isha, if this place is not full, they are not allowed to pray up front. This place has to be full. Like this area here has to be absolutely full in order for us to use. For if Nafila, for Taraweeh, for example, or Eid or something, that's fine. Even if people are up front or on the other side, it's not a problem. But for Faridah, for Jum'ah, for example, or for that's why I tell people who come for Jum'ah, fill this space first so that it's for the rukhsa or the fatwa that I'm offering to be acceptable in terms of praying up front when needed. Wallahu a'lam. وإمامة النساء تقف في صفهن. A female imam is different. She stands in their line. So they don't stand behind her. Like if ladies were to close this masjid and it was just a ladies session, they want to pray Maghrib, then she wouldn't stand up front here. She would stand with them. They would stand in this line or this line, and she would stand right in the middle between them. She wouldn't stand ahead of them. ويليه, what is this? Did I miss something? ويليه الرجال ثم الصبيان ثم النساء كجنائزهم. This is in terms of who stands. So men stand behind the imam, then youths behind them, and then women behind them. So that's how it should be. Like when you're praying in a masjid, what should happen is that the imam and then all of the scholars or al-amayim, the people who have knowledge, should be standing right behind the imam, and then all of the men, then all of the youth, then all of the ladies. And that just makes it easier for people to get out and to move a bit more freely and for it to be more organized. Of course, we don't have that here anymore, but that's how it should be. ومن لم يقف معهم إلا كافر أو امرأة أو من علم حدثه أحدهما أو صبي في فرض ففذ. So someone standing in obligatory prayer is considered to be alone if no one stands with him except for a non-Muslim, a woman, someone who, known to have a ritual impurity, or during obligatory prayers, a minor. So really, if you want jama'ah, then you need more than, you can't have someone who's non-Muslim, who's just practicing, or a child, or a woman that is foreign to you. Like if it's your wife, then it counts, but if a woman that's foreign to you, then it doesn't count, right? So it counts as if you're praying alone. ومن وجد فرجة دخلها وإلا عن يمين الإمام فإن لم يمكنه فله أن ينبه من يقوم معه. Whoever finds a gap in the prayer line, even if far away enters it, it is the same if he finds a line that is not packed together. Otherwise, he stands on the right of the imam. So if you come in and you see there's a space or a gap, you go fill the gap. If there's no, then you start on the right and then you build on the right. And this is based on how the masjid is built. If the masjid is built normally where the entrance is from the back, so you have both sides, then you do that. If the entrance is only on the right, then you start from the left and you come closer. So really in this masjid, we should start from the left and then build this way. Start from the left and build, because there's only one entrance. It's all on the right side. So if everyone builds on the right, then the masjid won't function. So you have to, this is based on, again, how the masajid are designed. All right. فإن صلى فذ ركعة لم تصح. وإن ركع فذا ثم دخل في الصف ووقف معه آخر قبل سجود الإمام صحت. So if a follower performs one congregational prayer cycle without anyone standing with them, the prayer is not valid, but it is valid if the follower bows alone and someone enters the row and joins him before the Imam prostrates, or if someone else stands with the follower before the Imam prostrates. So this is again the Hanbali's position on praying alone in a saf. So for the Hanbalis, if the line is full and you come and you stand behind the line, And it's one of the opinions of the Shafi'i madhab as well, but it's not the prominent one. So if I'm standing in line, the line's up here, the imam's praying up there, and I'm praying here alone. As long as before I perform sujood with the imam, and if I start with the Fatiha, someone comes and joins me, I'm fine. If no one joins me, then for the Hanbalis, that rak'ah doesn't count. I have to call someone back. And how do you do that? You start your rak'ah, you do takbir, Allahu Akbar, and then you tap on someone's, and then they come back. And then they keep a gap on the right, or they keep a gap on the left, and then there's two people standing in the line. Now you don't have to do that if you know people are coming in. If a new line is stopping, you see people coming, just start your prayer. But if you go beyond, like if you start the rak'ah and then it goes for the Hanbali specifically, if you go on, this is not for everyone else. Like the rest of the madhab don't see this. So if you're standing alone in the line for the rest of the madhab, you're fine. Your prayer is valid. Is just recommended for the Shafi'is to be alone in the saf. So they recommend that you tap someone on the shoulder and come back. But the Hanbalis require it if you pray a full rak'ah alone, because they don't see that rak'ah to qualify. So what a Hanbali person would do is that if you prayed a full rak'ah alone and then someone came in, he would make up the rak'ah at the end of the prayer. That's what they would do, because they understand that rak'ah does not count. So I'm going to end with that. So this is where we finish. We finish at the end of... So just before rules for following the imam. So that's where this course is going to finish. I'm going to put the announcement of this is where the part 1 ends on the slide, so you know to what extent you should be following stuff and what you should be aware of. And then we'll start the next semester from rules of following the imam, moving forward until the end of the text, the ibadat, or the rituals part of this text. We will take the next 2 or 3 weeks off. The exam will be at the end of the month, and then we will resume the second part of the Hanbali course, second week of September, inshallah ta'ala. We'll send out, it won't be a Monday, because I'm not around on Mondays, so we'll send out like the details. Once we put out the announcements for the different courses, if you are a credit student in this course, then you will be automatically sent to the to the second course on your own. If you weren't a credit student in this course and you want to take the second one, you have to actually come and talk to us. You can apply, and then we'll call you for a meeting, because you're going to have to somehow pick up what you've missed, because it's not to take the second part without the first part for this course. For the Shafi'i course, it was fine because they're completely different, but for this one, it's not. You have to; they're very connected. So if you didn't take the first part, it's going to be very hard for you to keep up with the second part, inshallah ta'ala. So that will all be communicated over the next couple of weeks, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. Subhanakallah bihamdika, la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik.